Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
What is going on, Fun and Games podcast listeners? My name is Eric Gess. I am the host of the Unlockables podcast, which I bill as the story of video games, the people who play them, and the memories made along the way. I am back again for another side quest episode of the Fun and Games podcast. I'd like to thank Matt and Jeff very, very much for having me back on. It's always an honor to get to come on here and talk about some of my favorite games of all time in a much looser format than I'm usually used to. Now, I said returning because I was on for one other side questing episode, and during that episode, I got to talk about one of my favorite games of all time, which was Kingdom Hearts 2. If you want to go back and hear more about that, I would highly recommend scrolling down through all the list of episodes and going to listen to that one. And there I kind of gave the whole pitch and spiel of my show. So if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about what my show is about, I'd definitely go and listen to that episode. But at the top here, let me just give you my link tree. So if you want to connect with me after this episode, you can. linktr.ee/unlockables podcast. Now, like I said, today I am back to talk about another one of my favorite video games of all time. Matt messaged me and asked me to come on and do another side quest episode. And once again, I started scrolling through the list. And as soon as I got to F, my eyeballs immediately locked on a game that hadn't been picked yet. And I was so surprised that this game had not been picked yet, but absolutely delighted that I'm the one that gets to talk about it. And you probably already know this by the title of the episode. That game is, of course, Final Fantasy IX, one of my favorite games of all time, alongside Kingdom Hearts 2. Now, Final Fantasy games, everybody you talk to has got a different Final Fantasy game, it seems. And more often than not, it ends up being the one that you played first, right? Or one of the ones that you played first that kind of not only becomes your favorite Final Fantasy game, but kind of goes on to define the lens through which you view all of the other Final Fantasy games. And I think that's a large part of the reason why there's such a diverse fan base of Final Fantasy fans that have so many strong opinions about every single game that comes out that is after their personal favorite game. But Final Fantasy IX is actually the first game I ever played in the Final Fantasy series. And it was probably like the second or third RPG that I ever played overall. I'm assuming around this time I would have played Super Mario RPG, and being like a 9 or 10-year-old kid, I would have been neck deep in everything Pokemon. I would have had the Game Boy games. I would have been watching the show. But Final Fantasy IX was a revelation to me when it was shown to me. I remember very clearly the day that I first saw it. I went over to my cousin's house and we went into their basement, and he was like, "Hey, I have to show you this game," because we always like seeing what games each other got and seeing if we liked each other's games, so we knew what games to get for Christmas or our birthdays if one or the other had a game that the other liked. So we go down to his basement and he turns on his PlayStation and he takes out one disc out of a case that had 4 discs in it. And I think this might have been my first experience with a video game that had like multiple discs or multiple cartridges or anything more than the standard just one-off disc. So I remember very clearly he puts in Final Fantasy IX and he fires it up, and you get that epic introduction of young Garnet on the ship during the storm, and she wakes up and you get the soaring view of the skyline of Alexandria, the sword piercing out of the castle, the theater ship getting ready to fly in, and you get that first scene where Zidane is in the theater ship, and I will be calling him Zidane, by the way. I don't like Zidane, and I've said Zidane for my entire life, and I cannot break the habit of saying it, so I will be calling him Zidane. But you get that epic introduction with Zidane in the theater ship, and you fight this guy with a dragon head alongside all the members of Tantalus. And once I heard that first iteration of the battle theme kick in, I don't know what clicked in my brain, but I was absolutely hooked. And I don't know how long after I saw him play it that I got it, but I knew that had to be the next game that I got. And back then when you're 9, 10 years old, you don't have any way to get all of the games that you want. So you either have to like save up your allowance, or you have to utilize some of your birthday or Christmas gifts to get the games that you want. And that was a big deal because you were only getting like a handful of games a year, if any. So you had to make sure that the games you were getting were ones that you really wanted to play. So that was a big choice back when you were a younger kid. So I knew for a fact that when I saw Final Fantasy IX, I just absolutely had to get it, capture my imagination, and the rest was history after I got it. I mean, Final Fantasy IX is responsible for my introduction to RPGs. And since that day, RPGs are probably my favorite genre of video game. They're unmatched in the way that they combine gameplay and visual presentation and music and writing to tell an incredibly emotional story that oftentimes can't be matched by any other medium. And I got to tell you, it wasn't the gameplay itself that kind of captured my imagination. It was the complete package because, while I enjoy the gameplay of Final Fantasy IX, it's simpler compared to other Final Fantasies in the series. Like, obviously, before it, 7 and 8, you have the materia system and you have the junction system from 8 that offers a lot of degree of customization, and 9's battle system and combat and equipment system is very much straightforward, traditional RPG battle and equipment system. There's not really much going on there that can confuse you with like a degree of customizability. I really like it. I recognize now today that the game is kind of slow. It takes a while to get into battles. It takes a while for characters to take their turn. So Final Fantasy IX is probably one of the slower games in the series, but it wasn't the gameplay that really kind of captured me. It was the story and the characters. And the more I played through the game, the more I fell in love with characters. And that was not really something that I was used to because, yes, I mean, I loved characters from my childhood. Mario was the first game I ever played, so I liked Mario and I liked Pikachu, obviously, with Pokemon, but you're not forming a connection with those characters in the way that you are when a story is being told to you. And the story of Final Fantasy IX is probably my favorite thing about it. It's one of the greatest stories ever told, not just in video games, but I think in storytelling. And just the way that it talks about the characters and the way that it's paced, it has this really incredible thing where it kind of tells this overarching story, and all of the characters have like mini arcs inside this overarching story, and they all fit in there incredibly well. Like, all these characters will have their moments in the light to shine. It doesn't ever feel like we're cutting away from the main part of the story to like pause and stop and do things with other characters. All the arcs are so interwoven with the main story so beautifully and just such a natural way that not a lot of other games accomplish. And speaking of those themes, there's some of my favorite themes of stories in all of storytelling. Probably one of them that sticks out the most is this idea of home and belonging, and where do you belong, and how much of your existence is defined by where you were born or how you were born into this world, and how much of this existence is defined by what you make of it and the friends you make and the people that you love. And that theme is seen most strongly through the protagonist, Zidane, as I mentioned before. Zidane is a member of Tantalus. He starts off as this happy-go-lucky young guy that really just likes girls. And when Sakaguchi was coming up with the concept for Zidane, that was like his whole pitch. He was like, oh, he just likes girls. So a very, very stark contrast from his predecessors for the first two PlayStation 1 games, which were Cloud and Squall, these two kind of very stoic type of characters. Zidane is like the opposite side of the spectrum. But Zidane is 16. He was raised by the thieving group Tantalus for his whole life. And while he has this kind of happy-go-lucky attitude and he has a very strong affinity for his friends and is very protective of the people he cares about, it's always kind of been in the back of his mind that he doesn't know where he's from. He doesn't know his origins or if he has parents or what his life was like before. The only thing he can remember before coming to Tantalus is a bright blue light. Once you get to like Disc 3, Disc 4 towards the end, Zidane and the party go to a neighboring planet called Terra, and we find out that's where Zidane wasn't born. He was created there, and he's created with a purpose. He was created to be sent to the planet Gaia, which is the planet where he has lived all of his life, to be an angel of death and destabilize the governments there and cause a war that would disrupt the cycle of souls by killing a lot of people. And Zidane can't believe this. He can't square his existence with what he's been told to what he's lived his entire life. And this causes a pretty positive character for like 3 discs or most of the acts of the story to spiral and kind of go into this depressed state that we don't normally see him in. And it culminates in this very beautiful moment at the end of this where Zidane kind of goes into this zombie-like comatose state where he just tells himself over and over, I'm useless and the people around me don't love me. But his friends come for him anyways, and just culminates in this beautiful moment where he just is determined to break out of wherever he's being held. And he's fighting monster after monster, refusing help, but his friends show up in the battles for him anyways. And it isn't until Garnet gets there that it finally breaks him out of this kind of comatose, like this self-deprecating, this depression spell that he's in, because he feels like he's unworthy of all the people that he's come to love, of the home that he's come to love, of the things that he's done, just because his origins were something more sinister. And he's able to come to terms with that. And it's just a really beautiful narrative of coming to terms with something in your past and not letting it define you, and you getting to pick the people that you choose to call your friends, to call your family, to call your loved ones. Your family that you're born with is not your only family, and sometimes it's not the best family. So you have every right and every possibility in your life to choose the people that you want to love. And Zidane comes to discover this and wants to fight to protect it no matter what. He kind of comes to discover this. It's an absolutely beautiful moment. It isn't my favorite theme in this story, but I think it's the one that's presented the most front forward. And I think for those of us that may have grown up with some childhood trauma, or maybe aren't on the best terms with our parents or guardians who raised us, this is a really beautiful story of overcoming that trauma in your past and not letting what happened to you in the past define you, regardless of what your so-called family tells you. You have every right to go and start a new family and have new friends and new loved ones. And I just think that is the absolute most beautiful message a game can possibly tell you. In combination of all the other stuff that Final Fantasy IX talks about, it's a very, very incredible story about life and death, and the way that we all as a human species have to square and face death someday, and the different ways that we do that, and the way that some of the characters in the story decide to react to that, and the way that the antagonist Kuja decides to react to that when he is faced with it. It's a very beautiful human story about all these emotions, and that is the reason I love it so much. It makes me cry every single time. All the big emotional moments in the story make me cry every single time. So, yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for another hour and just ramble off, but I know Matt and Jeff like to keep these episodes shorter, so I'm coming up on like 15-ish minutes here, maybe a little bit shorter by the time I cut it down. But Final Fantasy IX is a game that hits me in the heart every single time I play it. I love it so much. I can't wait to share it with my son when he's old enough. I hope that he loves it, but if not, that's okay. But yeah, my name is Eric. Again, I'm the host of the Unlockables. Thank you so much, Matt and Jeff, for having me on. Thank you so much to the Fun and Games community for listening to this short little episode that I provided for you. Always awesome to talk to you guys and to be here and to be able to do this and share my love of gaming with a wider audience. So, until I talk to you guys next time, I'll leave you with my traditional outing. It's not just a story of video games, it's the story of you. And as always, remember, happy gaming.
Hello there! My name is Leo, and I'm here to tell you all about my Dune podcast, Gom Jabbar, the perfect podcast for new fans of Dune and longtime fans of Dune alike. My co-host Abu and I dive deep in both spoiler-free and spoiler-heavy episodes covering, Frank Herbert's original novels, the film adaptations, the board games, the comics, the upcoming video games, the HBO TV series, anything we can get our hands on. We even have a companion book club series to make your first or your 15th read-through even better. So, if you recently saw Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Dune, or if you read Dune back when it came out in 1965, this is the podcast for you. You can find Gom Jabbar on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, pretty much anywhere you find your podcasts, and we hope you join us on the Golden Path.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.